What's going on, everyone? It is time for the Awesemo NFL Strategy Show. We are talking the Pro Bowl. The Pro Bowl is back this year at Las Vegas Allegiant Stadium, 3 p.m. Eastern on Sunday. And we're still here. We're still talking NFL strategy because there are DFS slates to try to conquer here this weekend. And I am joined, as always, by my co-host, Matt Gajewski. Follow him on Twitter, Matt_Gajewski. How are you today, Matt?
I'm doing good. The Pro Bowl is a decent animal to take down here. It's like preseason in a way, where we don't necessarily know who's going to be playing a majority of these snaps. We do know the starters at least, which is positive, but there's a lot of preseason feel here is the way and it's interesting because it's not preseason caliber players, but it's preseason in the way that playing time is so uncertain. And there's some edges I think we can certainly exploit, but how are you doing?
I'm doing very, very well. I'm excited to be talking some strategy here. This is uncharted waters for me, to be honest, because I had not really played the Pro Bowl. Then the projections came out and the slate came out, and I was like, all right, clearly we're diving into this one. And yeah, I agree here. There's a preseason feel, but you know, we were looking at some research earlier this week that shows that there are some key edges, at least from the last 3 or 4 seasons of Pro Bowls that, some trends that we can look at and try to exploit here. But like you said, preseason means there's going to be a lot of high variance. I think absolutely nothing strategy-wise is off the table here this week. And yeah, let's dig into that real quick. Like from a bird's eye view, we'll start here with just, how do we treat this differently? When you say preseason strategy, can you dig into that a little more? What do you mean specifically?
Yeah, so it has this preseason feel where it's not so much we're looking at raw projections, but we want to know playing time. Who's going to be on the field the most? And that's very difficult to decipher. In things like the preseason, we have beat reporter reports and things we can look at to try to figure some of those things out. With the Pro Bowl, it's more so historical trends. Like, how are these teams using players in the Pro Bowl? Are there any special rules we need to be aware of? How many of each player are on each of these rosters? And then generally, this is a game for fun. If you've ever watched the Pro Bowl before, we all know these guys aren't trying to get hurt. It's not your normal football game. A lot of them are just going to go to the ground, go out of bounds, and things like that we just have to understand. So it's a showdown format. So all of you are familiar with that, but it's just the feel of the slate is a little bit different.
Yeah, 100%. Agree with everything there. And there are some positional things that we've kind of noticed since at least 2017 that we're definitely going to talk about as we get into this one. Matt, we got an hour to break down one game. We got some time here. Is this really the best way to do the All-Star game in the NFL at this point? I'm excited to play some DFS, but let's brainstorm here for a second. I was talking with my buddy at the gym this week, and, what about a 7 on, obviously give Pro Bowl honors. Let's have some skills competitions for the linemen. But as you said, nobody wants to get hurt. What about a 7-on-7 game? What about a flag football game? I'm just out of line here. Are we crazy?
No, I don't think so. The only reason I watched the game is because I played DFS. Previously, before DFS entered my life, this wasn't a game I had any interest in whatsoever. I remember watching it even as a child. These teams were very lax. I mean, not really trying, I think is the easiest way to put it. So I'm with you. 7-on-7 seems like a pretty good solution. Obviously, the linemen aren't represented, but honestly, I wouldn't be opposed to doing away with the game altogether or whatever form the game may take and just doing skill competitions. We know these guys are crazy athletes, so it'd be cool to see them doing some things. I don't have any real life examples, but we know the NBA All-Star game, they do the dunk contest. Baseball, they do the home run derby. They're starting to experiment a little more with some of these things for the NFL Pro Bowl. but it would be cool to see them fully embrace it. So I think I would lean into more of the skill competitions.
Yeah, who knows? Maybe they like really embrace, because they used to, when it was in Honolulu every year, remember they kind of embraced the Hawaii of it every time. And so they would have these competitions, but there was like, it's very thematic is the way I'd probably put it.
Some of them are so dumb.
It's really true. But like,
sorry, go ahead.
Yeah. Well, in this time of betting being allowed and the game being in Vegas, maybe you Vegasify things, if you will, a little bit.
I remember.
I'm not exactly sure what that means.
They did like a drone drop, like who could catch the ball from the highest altitude, which I find particularly dumb. Like, who cares? I think something that'd be awesome is like a 40-yard dash or a 100-yard meter race. I remember maybe in the heart of the pandemic, a couple of the fastest guys did like a charity sprint. Let's get all these guys out there, see them run, do things like that. Like, who is the highest vertical jump? I think you could even like make it sort of like the combine. See who's actually the best athlete in some of these things, or like short area quickness drills. I know they do like an obstacle course. It's probably my favorite. I don't know if they're doing that again this year, but fully embracing the skills and seeing just how athletic these guys are. Like, dropping a punt from a drone really high in the air seems just as much luck as it is skill. I don't know.
I think you're kind of right there. Okay. All right. Here's my final pitch. 7-on-7, but the linemen who got elected to the Pro Bowl have to play one full quarter at whatever position you want them to.
I 100% in. If you incorporate the linemen and you need to use like one lineman on every single play, and there's like certain rules that specify what players have to be on the field at a certain time, I'm fully on board. The linemen are great athletes too. I mean, like I remember Tristan Wirfs at the combine. The dude had one of the craziest vertical jump size adjusted I've ever seen. Tristan Wirfs can probably dunk a basketball with ease. Like, these linemen, I don't think people realize how athletic some of them truly are. It would be cool to see them do stuff like that.
That's true. Like, defensive ends and linebackers out there, they have like physical traits that are very similar to like the best athletes in the NBA. It would be really cool to see them out there. Jordan Klein in chat, we want the shuttle run. Yeah, exactly. Like,
I want the shuttle run.
We're going to do the whole old presidential fitness tests. That's what we're going to do.
Oh, I never passed it.
Oh, gosh, no. Absolutely.
I
actually figured you would want. I couldn't touch the flexibility. Gotcha. Yeah. All right. Now that we've like got into completely off the deep end within the first 15 minutes of the show, definitely give us a like and a subscribe so you can keep up with all of our shows, DFS offers, giveaways, and much, much more. Once you subscribe, hit that notification buttons to get alerts when our shows go live. Be sure to also check out today's free premium tools and data, which are NBA ownership rankings and NHL player rankings, as well as our monthly podcast giveaway. Oh, this is cool. Just subscribe to our podcast channel and leave a 5-star review with your Awesemo username or Twitter handle to be entered to win a free month of Awesemo Plus Platinum. And guys, while we're just doing this first part of the show, I want to remind you guys at 12 o'clock, do not turn off this stream. Keep it right here. We've got the FanUp NFL Strategy stream with Greg and with Terry, where they're going to be going through tournament strategy specifically for FanUp for an extra half hour. All you got to do is not close this out once we say goodbye at the end of the hour here. So just going to remind you now, going to remind you later, and then we'll get you going with that FanUp offer that we have going on right now. It's pretty cool over there. All right. Okay, let's dig into the actual game at hand, Matt. We'll start by going position by position, usually kind of go game by game here for the strategy show, but with only one game and with so much uncertainty with the playing time, I think it is actually more beneficial to go through this team by team and position by position. So let's start with the quarterbacks. In the AFC, Justin Herbert has been named the starter here. And not surprising, the AFC West was one of the strongest divisions in football. They have two quarterbacks represented here. Patrick Mahomes will be playing, and Lamar Jackson will be here as well. What are your initial thoughts about these players? And then looking at the strategy, are there any values that stand out for you?
Yeah, they're all amazing quarterbacks. Very easy to say that. So pricing is going to be the biggest thing here for me on the AFC, where we have Herbert is the most expensive, Mahomes, and then Lamar. The first thing I'll say about Lamar these running quarterbacks historically aren't exactly maximizing their mobility in these games. Obviously, they don't want to get hurt. And I think that's the main reason driving this. So when we talk about Lamar here, I wouldn't expect him to be taking off and running. Maybe there's a designed run here or there where he slides or quickly gets out of bounds, but don't expect Lamar to be taking hits. If you're actually just looking at the pure passers, and I think they want to make this game entertaining, they're going to encourage passing. That lends itself more to Herbert and Mahomes. I think Herbert as the starter here, he's somebody you can look to with just a 200 price difference on DraftKings specifically. But ultimately, I do have a preference towards the top two at the board, just with Lamar probably not using his legs as much. But how do you view the quarterbacks for the AFC?
I personally think that Mahomes is a pretty easy value for me. We don't have a lot of certainty about the way this snap share ends up going, because all three of these players are going to play plenty here. But at least we have some historical trends that say that two AFC quarterbacks in the Patrick Mahomes era are capable of having 125 plus yards passing and a touchdown here in this game. But that's really the ceiling. I do think that there's like a 1 percentile outcome for Lamar Jackson, where like he gets a run to the outside, breaks a tackle, and then nobody wants to touch him for the entertainment value of him just like streaking down the sidelines. So I'm not going to completely rule him out in a way that, we might say in general, rushing quarterbacks underperform. I don't disagree with that. But Mahomes for me is that one player on the AFC side that I think with his two superstar players in the lineup as well, I think there's just, maybe a camaraderie factor that we can't really quantify. But I just finished a Prize Picks video, and we are sponsored by Prize Picks in this stream as well. And one of my top plays this week for the Pro Bowl is Patrick Mahomes over 68.5 passing yards. I think that's a pretty easy over if he gets even just like 8 or 9 pass attempts.
Yeah, that could happen on one play. I mean, they're going to take shots downfield. Corners aren't going to be playing as tight of coverage as they normally would be. You typically see a lot of scoring in these games, but there's a lot of volatility too. With Lamar Jackson, even though he's not running, he could easily be the guy that completes a deep ball here too. And you mentioned the overall stat lines, like around 150 yards in his score. I think that's pretty routine for quarterbacks. The way quarterback is scored on DraftKings specifically, to me, it lends itself more to a flex play than a captain play. You're getting 4 points for the touchdown. You're not catching any passes, so you don't have any PPR bonuses here. Very, very unlikely to hit a 300-yard passing bonus. So to me, these players are quite safe, but their ceiling is limited. For example, with Patrick Mahomes, there was a couple balls to a receiver. Those PPR points and the 6-point touchdown could easily outscore Mahomes himself. So when I am playing quarterbacks, for me, it's going to be in the flex position more than the captain. How do you view that strategy?
No, that is a great point, Matt. I hadn't actually gone to that logical conclusion, but that makes all the sense in the world, right? Because the salary for quarterbacks on these slates are increased because their statistics are significantly higher. Their volume statistics are significantly higher. But if you take that volume edge away because they're splitting time, quarterbacks are with two other superstars at the position, then suddenly that salary differential doesn't make a whole lot of sense. And of course, the salaries are pretty linear here, as you would expect. And we do have skill position players at the top, but it still doesn't mean that there's a lot of certainty of ceiling in the way with quarterbacks that we typically have. 300 yards passing is almost completely out of the question here, unless like something pretty freakish happens or, knock on wood, this doesn't happen, but like somebody gets hurt or pulls something and, they're down to 1 or 2 quarterbacks for the remainder of the game.
Yeah. Sean in our chat, good friend, Sean, Awesemo employee, says Lamar's not playing in the game. Chris Mortensen reported that he won't play in the Pro Bowl due to his ankle injury, and he's questionable on our DraftKings platform. So just watch that. Again, this game literally means nothing. You're going to see players withdraw from the game by the time this video ends. So everything we said about Lamar, whoever his replacement is, same exact logic, same exact analysis. It looks like it might be Mac Jones. Obviously, Mac Jones isn't going to run, but we weren't expecting Lamar to run much either. So literally, it's the same analysis. Mac Jones would be the best quarterback play, in my opinion, on the board just because he's extremely cheap.
Yeah.
So, I mean, like,
yeah, I guess that's right.
If you're watching this video a couple days later, like, guys are going to opt out of the game. The game means nothing. Just you guys understand.
Yeah. And
the analysis is the same. It's about who plays, not what if we think Lamar is great or not.
That's a great point, right? Because like the ceiling probability for any of these AFC quarterbacks at the top is really essentially the same, right? Because Justin Herbert is going to be throwing to Tyreek Hill, Deontay Johnson, Stephon Diggs, Hunter Renfrow underneath, and Travis Kelce at the tight end position. Like he's going to be able to find people just as well as Patrick Mahomes. And obviously, Mac Jones has a lower probability of success simply because he just doesn't have the production history of the other two players. But if you're looking at salary-based expectations, now he starts to look like a really interesting play. He's at, yeah, gosh.
In a game where nobody's trying, I think the ceiling for all these players are essentially the same. Maybe Mac Jones is a little bit behind Mahomes and Lamar Jackson, but ultimately nobody on the field is trying. He has just as much of a chance of hitting a deep ball as Mahomes and Herbert, in my opinion. Like the talent difference isn't wide enough. We're in a game where nobody's actually playing hard, that it really makes a difference.
That's going to be different than Nelson Aguilar, Kendrick Bourne, and Hunter Henry and whatever.
The best receiver since Alabama.
Back to Bama. That's right. That's right. He's back to Bama. Good for Mac Jones. And I mean, seriously good for Mac Jones. Like being named as a Pro Bowl alternate as a rookie, you know, in a pretty darn tough division. He played very well. Definitely in that game manager role. You know, we have him projected for about 8.5 points still, but you know, at a salary, that's going to be just fine. I still probably want to chase the ceilings of Herbert and Mahomes, but like you said, it's probably the flex play instead of the captain play for me. All right, let's switch it over to the NFC side. We have injury situations as well. I believe Russell Wilson is going to opt out of this game. So we got Kyler Murray and Kirk Cousins in this one as well. Just who we thought it would be at the beginning of the year. Well, for Kyler, we definitely would. But from there, obviously there's a great receiving core in the NFC. But, you know, I guess Kyler kind of sticks out here as the one player who has a true ceiling if, you know, he's being compared to Kirk Cousins and splitting time evenly.
Yeah, I view this as the exact same. Kyler's not going to be running at least as much. Historically, we've seen that. So I don't really see the ceiling between him and Kirk Cousins being all that different. This is a spot where I'll just save salary with Kirk Cousins. I don't see that Russell Wilson's opting out of the game. Where did we see that? Because didn't he replace Tom Brady?
Well, I'm thrilled. I'm thrilled to be wrong. Yes, I knew Tom Brady dropped out of the game.
He's not in the player pool though.
Yeah, I think what happened is, he didn't make it into my spreadsheet because his salary was 0. But now that I'm back on the page, we have a projection for him, which is a good sign that we at least at this point think he's going to be playing. You already gave the caveat up top. Don't hate us if some of these players we talk about end up dropping out before Sunday here. Honestly, the positional strategy is the most important part.
Yeah, like Russell Wilson's not in the player pool.
Oh, okay. Oh, gotcha. So he's projected, but he's only for the purposes.
Replacing Brady in the game, but he's literally not on DraftKings.
Interesting. So it does take away from the ceiling probabilities of Kyler Murray and Kirk Cousins, while not necessarily letting you hedge directly off of him. That's an interesting wrinkle to this slate so far.
He could be added, like we just don't know. We're recording this on Thursday, and we have no idea who's going to play and who's not.
Yeah.
So like you said, it's the positional analysis which makes the most sense here, because we know historically the running quarterbacks, they're not running as much. They all have about the same pass attempts, and they all have a similar ceiling. Is there a slight talent edge towards Murray over Kirk Cousins? Absolutely. Is there a talent edge, Patrick Mahomes and Justin Herbert over Mac Jones? For sure. Defenses aren't trying on the other side. Receivers are going to have open looks downfield. All of them have a somewhat equal probability of hitting them. So for me, I'm going to be paying down, and I'm going to be using a lot of quarterbacks in the flex. That's another thing too, like an overarching strategy here. People in Showdown altogether max out their salary. You can play Kirk Cousins at a cheaper price, play some of the other players we'll get to at the other skill position players, leave salary on the table, have a unique roster. And honestly, in normal Showdown, you're sacrificing projection in that instance. But on the Showdown for the Pro Bowl, I don't even necessarily know that you're sacrificing projection, because I would have Kirk Cousins. Yeah, I would have Kirk Cousins right up there with Murray.
Wild to think about, but the salary difference and honestly, the projection difference is minimal compared to the salary difference. So I think that makes all the sense in the world from a DFS strategy standpoint. Before we get into the running back position, though, if you are a resident of New York, sports betting is now live in your state. Welcome sports betting to your state with a fantastic bonus offer, and actually all the bonus offers we have available here at Awesemo. Just click either the link pinned in the live YouTube chat to browse all of our offers, including a bet $10, win $200 if any team scores a touchdown, and a free NBA jersey if you bet $100 with Caesars Sportsbook. You can also take advantage of a $1,000 risk-free bet with BetMGM and up to a $1,500 first match deposit bonus with Caesars as well. These offers are just too good to pass up, so click that link pinned and start betting today. All right, the running back positions. We'll bounce it back over to the AFC. We've got the rookie who's been used by far the most of any rookie in on any team, Najee Harris, and then Jonathan Taylor, the all-world running back for the Indianapolis Colts. We've also got Pat Ricard, who's basically a fullback, plays for the Ravens. We don't really expect him to be used all that much. But what are you feeling about this running back core? Are either of these players really piquing your interest because they have some of the highest salaries on the slate?
They're honestly pretty good fades. So overarching strategy with running backs in particular, these are players that don't get a lot of usage overall, and they're players that have relatively low ceilings. When we look just historically back at the most recent Pro Bowls, it's Jay Ajayi that leads the group with just 7 carries, and Ezekiel Elliott leads in yardage with 33. That was up through 2019. In the 2020 Pro Bowl, it was pretty similar. You had Dalvin Cook lead the NFC with 17 yards on 4 carries, and then you had Mark Ingram lead the AFC with 5 carries, 31 yards. Just for your reference, the NFC only ran the ball 4 times the whole game. They threw it 42 times and ran it 4.
That is certainly on 7. They are telling us what they want to do, Matt. Come on.
They're basically playing glorified 7-on-7 already. So these teams aren't running the ball whatsoever, unless you have a pass catching back, which doesn't look like they're used very much either. Like Ezekiel Elliott led the team with 2 catches, 15 yards. Then on the other side was actually Derrick Henry, 2 catches, 22 yards in the most recent Pro Bowl. So this is a spot where this position is just wildly underutilized, and it ends up being one of the most expensive spots on the slate. Unless you're just playing pure tournament strategy, like one of them scores a touchdown, it's full fade for me on the running backs.
I dig it. So I guess the only thing you can say is both players, particularly Taylor, are talented enough where like they can really just change their DFS fate with one run. So in that regard, it's possible. But, and like we said earlier, because we don't really have salary concerns really at all here, it's not like we are struggling to get up to that top salary, but I don't think that it's somewhere we need to go. As you said, the yardage totals, particularly on the ground, have been very low for these teams. Now, I do think that we should talk fullbacks for a minute, and we'll use it to transition over to the NFC side of the ball too, because we've got Pat Ricard and Kyle Juszczyk from the San Francisco 49ers on the NFC side of the ball, both players who have had plays sort of drawn up for them in the past. If Lamar Jackson was playing, maybe Pat Ricard would have a little bit higher of a boost for me. But I think fullbacks are players that you could actually take chances on. We saw Anthony Sherman recently have a huge game. I believe it was the 2019 Pro Bowl. He had 101 total yards and a touchdown. So I think, especially when you're talking about getting unique, Pat Ricard and Kyle Juszczyk for the NFC aren't the craziest plays there are.
Definitely not. And I mean, it's just a crazy game. You're going to see these teams try funny things, get random guys the ball that don't normally carry the ball. So the Ricard situation makes sense. Anthony Sherman, I think, might be a little bit of an outlier, but even Kyle Juszczyk, he's been in Pro Bowls before, and he's not your prototypical banger fullback. He's actually a good pass catcher, good pass blocker. So we've seen some kind of gadget type plays for Juszczyk, where he has had productive games in the Pro Bowl already. So I like that he's already done it. I like his skill set compared to Ricard. And Juszczyk, I mean, if you do need to save salary, you probably don't. He's the second least expensive player on the NFC side. So he's going to slide right into lineups. No constraints whatsoever salary-wise with Juszczyk. I like that he's a good pass catcher too. So if you see any sort of like wheel route stuff, weird stuff on the NFC side, Juszczyk's a guy that could be used a lot. And again, they don't carry multiple fullbacks. So anytime there's a fullback on the field, it's going to be Juszczyk, it's going to be Ricard. It's not like the running back position where you have 3, 4 of them splitting work. It's going to be all Juszczyk, all Ricard anytime they're on the field. And that's something that we can, have some confidence in.
I can't help myself but laugh. Like, at the end of the year, we get together for the NFL All-Star game and we watch Kirk Cousins throw wheel routes to Kyle Juszczyk. I mean, you got to love it. That's exactly what I think of when I think great NFL. Actually, Juszczyk, he's a baller. Like I love him, but it's kind of the point we were making earlier about how the players dropping out in this game sometimes can be the bigger story than the players actually playing. And of course, playing time. Mike Matthews in chat made me laugh too. I wouldn't say they never tried in the Pro Bowl. I remember Pro Bowls before 2008 where they were really tackling. AP kept trying to run through Ray Lewis and then you could actually sack the QB2. Anybody remember Sean Taylor? No, they definitely used to try in the Pro Bowl. That is something
it's a little before my time.
Man, it's something that we don't see. It's something that we don't see anymore. That's for sure. And I do think there is a bit of business decisions being made, and I don't blame them. As we said earlier, like no one wants anyone to get hurt. They just want a solid entertainment product. All right, going to the running back core on the NFC side of the ball. I think there's some really interesting game theory you could do here because obviously we're talking about running backs having high salary and not really performing up to salary-based expectations. That makes them large field tournament plays only in general. But look at this makeup of the 3 running backs on the NFC side. We've got Alvin Kamara, Dalvin Cook, James Conner. And Dalvin Cook is a great rusher, but he's not used in the receiving game on his own team. And James Conner was second in the NFL in goal line carries, third in the NFL in touchdown. He's the goal line hammer of this offense. How about the over 15.5 receiving yards for Alvin Kamara in this game that they currently have on Prize Picks? That's where I'm sitting right now.
I think that's a really interesting one. If I'm going to play any running back on this team, it's Kamara because we've seen him line up in the slot. We've seen him line up out wide on certain occasions. This year, he played 63 snaps in the slot, 71 from the wide alignment. And he has fantastic receiving chops. We know these teams are going to be throwing the ball at an elevated rate. So even on limited snaps for Kamara, if they're throwing the ball more, that should offset some of the playing concerns and him being such a solid pass catcher. I wouldn't be surprised if he gets a catch out of the slot or out wide. Again, they're going to be trying to do like creative, cool, fan-friendly things. So as far as the Prize Picks prop goes, that's one I like as well, Matt. And I think Kamara is the most interesting running back, not just in the NFC, but on the entire slate overall, if you are targeting one, because of his skill set and the kind of cool trick plays he could provide.
I want them to do some things with, here's the thing that really most concerns me about Kamara and his receiving floor here. It's Deebo Samuel, right? It's Deebo Samuel, the wide receiver / running back. Now, Kyle Shanahan's not the one calling plays for the NFC. At least I don't think so. But there is a situation where I think he was used so uniquely on his own team that it might be hard to replicate here with Deebo. I agree with you. I mean, Alvin Kamara was number 1 in the NFL among running backs in route participation rate, number 4 in slot snap rate. So I do think that is the player most likely by far to be used as a receiver here. But I do think with Cook and Conner in the lineup, there's very, very little goal line upside for him. Am I correct there? It's more about receiving upside. And from a DFS standpoint, you never say never to a player like Kamara getting into the end zone. But I just feel like the other 2 players in his backfield lend themselves to being put in when they're at the 5-yard line.
For sure. And I mean, you look at the way this game is played historically, it's typically not long, sustained drives. It's a lot of big plays, chunk plays downfield, not a lot of like goal line plays. If drives stall, typically they're going to kick a field goal. No one's ever going to go for it on 4th. You're going to see like just very conservative gameplay outside of like the shots these teams take. So it's not really a situation where I think we get a lot of goal line carries for James Conner. So I think in that situation, James Conner maybe plays that role, but I don't even think that's a guarantee either. I think they literally might just split playing time. like, okay, this is James Conner series, this is Kamara series, this is so-and-so series. So they don't come off the field. And then when their series is done, boom, next back in. So I don't even know if the goal line role is necessarily something we need to worry about. I think it's literally just how much scoring equity do these players have? How much equity do they have in the form of, can they get a big play? And for me, it's Kamara that has the most. The goal line situation, it's definitely useful in the regular season, but I don't really see it being something that these teams will focus on here, but I could be wrong.
Well, obviously, we're talking about range of outcomes here, obviously, but I think that is solid analysis here. I was looking at the stats, the receiving stats, just comparing when I was trying to see if I wanted to go in on that prop for Kamara. Did you know James Conner averaged more receptions and receiving yards this year per game than Dalvin Cook?
I didn't think I'm actually kind of surprised.
We definitely think of Conner as the goal line hammer, and definitely it was goal line usage and touchdowns that propelled him into this game. He played well, but when you score that often, you look real good for the Pro Bowl. I was just surprised to see how little usage Dalvin Cook gets in the receiving game, and I just honestly think it's a shame. They just need to use him more creatively.
Shame.
I think that kind of rounds it out for the running back position. Any last thoughts from either side, the AFC or the NFC, on this running back position?
Just like when you're thinking about running backs versus pass catchers, who has a bigger chance of breaking off a big play? We like Kamara because you can catch balls, but I mean, these running backs, we all know that when players get to contact, they're going to go down. When they're close to contact, they're going to go down. It's much more likely that a running back faces contact, like running up the middle or doing a sweep, than it is a receiver like streaking downfield, beating coverage. So I think the big plays are far more lopsided in favor of the receivers and the tight ends, which we'll get to.
We are brought to you today by Prize Picks. We have been talking about them all show already. And if you don't know about them, now's the best time to get into Prize Picks. They are offering daily prop-based contests, and you can use promo code Awesemo to get up to a $100 first match deposit bonus. There's no sharks, optimizers, or mass entries. You can use your knowledge of multiple sports with cross-sport entries. Download it in the App Store, Google Play, or go to prizepicks.com. And you can use our free player props tools that are designed specifically for Prize Picks. We'll keep mentioning some of our favorite plays. We've already mentioned two of them here. There's just a lot to do there. And if you have niche sport knowledge, there is no better place to play than Prize Picks. They've got you covered for just some wild sports. And as you would expect, not only do they have a bunch of Pro Bowl props already, but they've got you ready for the Super Bowl and all the basketball stuff you could want. So get in there, use promo code Awesemo when you sign up to get that first match deposit bonus. To the wide receiver position, we go back over to the AFC, and this is a really good receiving core. I mean, both sides are super stacked, as you would expect, and it kind of is the era of the wide receiver in the NFL. Tyreek Hill, Deontay Johnson, Stephon Diggs, Hunter Renfrow sneaks in there. I mean, he had an excellent year, but his target share kind of fell off. He's not quite at the caliber of the other three. Who's standing out, when you compare them to their salary-based expectations for you?
Again, it's the cheaper guys. I think the starters maybe get a little more run, so those are players you want to hone in on. But overall, a lot of these receivers are going to have similar opportunity. So I think on both sides, we can go the cheap route. But I think we should highlight just the game theory play first before we dive into like the play-by-play. And I want to know if you agree with this, but I largely view the receivers as having a much larger ceiling than the running backs, but I also think they come with a little more ownership than tight ends. And there's also more receivers on the roster. So I think these are volatile plays, but plays that have a lot of upside. When we look historically, oftentimes it's receivers and tight ends that are the top score on the slate, but receivers, just there being so many of them, and they come with generally higher ownership, they can be a little harder to predict. So these are players I want to mix into the captain spot and also play a lot of in the flex. And, more so than take a stand, I want to be mixing and matching these guys. But for overall theory, is that how you view receivers?
Yeah, in general, I do. I do think we have to just draw the talent line somewhere, right? Like Diggs, Johnson, and Hill are just, I'm not saying Renfro is a bad player. And honestly, his ability to separate underneath is elite and incredible for an offense. I'm not saying he's undeserving of this Pro Bowl selection. But in terms of big playability, when you're talking about Stephon Diggs having a 14.5-point median projection and Renfro having a 12.5-point median projection, I get it. It's DraftKings. There's the points per reception possibility, but give me 4,600 Stephon Diggs over 3,800 Hunter Renfro all day long, to be honest. I know that the projection and the value differential isn't that much there, but I just think the talent difference is, especially when you talk in terms of big plays, it's really Hill and Diggs, then Deontay Johnson, who rightfully so is peppered with targets, but he kind of overlaps with Renfro to an extent too in terms of route tree. So for me, give me Stephon Diggs at 4,600. He's my favorite play on the AFC side.
Yeah, I think all these guys are pretty good separators. Like Renfro, Diggs, Tyreek, Johnson, they're all known for their route running. Little game theory question for you. I don't have an answer to this, but do you think the receivers that separate a little easier could be targeted more because they're largely dealing with quarterbacks they don't have rapport with? You know, like, for example, we know this isn't a situation we'll have to worry about, but part of the reason like Jamar Chase and Devontae Adams are so successful is they're always covered and sometimes tightly, but Rodgers and Burrow are not afraid to give them the ball into coverage. And neither of those receivers are playing in this game. But for the purposes of this example, we know receivers like Renfro, and Diggs largely functions in this capacity too. They're receivers that can create space. So do you view there being a potential edge in receivers that are just good at getting open? I think there might be, but I'm not sure.
How much? That's a really solid thought.
But the thing is, true, like all four of these guys are good at it.
Yeah, that's true. So like how much can you really separate, even if it is true, how much can you really use it to separate out who's going to be utilized more? How much is that offset, though, by the fact that they are playing glorified backyard football, passing every down, which will lead itself to increased aggressiveness from top tier quarterbacks that are throwing the ball? So how much of that kind of balances things out? You know, they're going to throw one-on-ones like if they see it any time, period.
Yeah, for sure. And we know they want to make it an exciting game.
Yeah, even if it's zero separation, you know what I mean? Like they'll throw the jump ball.
Yeah, I think you're right about that.
But it's certainly not a bad thought. And you know, I think if they're playing some sort of base coverage on the NFC side and a linebacker gets lined up against Renfro, you're going to see some really funny slow-mo of a really good linebacker getting absolutely cooked by Renfro for a really nice 16-yard gain that I'm not sure is going to help you in DFS. On the NFC side, go ahead. No,
I never answered your question. I do agree with you. I like Diggs the most. So I just want to ask you that question, but I like Diggs. I think Hill's worth paying up for too. You're going to have to pay up for somebody. Like you're not going to punt every single position.
Yeah, and there's just some fun. Yeah, there's just some fun too. Like I can play Mahomes Hill stacks like within this wild game. So that is kind of fun to bet on the within team rapport possibility as well. But Diggs is by far we're headed over to the NFC side here. This is an insane lineup to me. Deebo Samuel, Justin Jefferson, Mike Evans, CeeDee Lamb, and maybe Jakeem Grant mixes in there, but he's really there for special teams. So I don't think so when you got that core four. Holy moly. If Kirk Cousins can't get them the ball, he cannot play quarterback.
He's got the rapport with Jefferson.
That's right. Yeah, we don't have anything to worry about. And I'm excited to see what, Kyler Murray can do. Obviously, he has a decent receiving core, but nothing like this. I think we do see some, weird designed plays where they basically just copy the 49ers and give Deebo some run. But in general, I really like Jefferson. I really like Evans. And gosh, it's hard to tease this out. Evans at 6'6". Like, give me Diggs at 46, but I don't hate that. How about you?
Evans is okay. I would prefer CeeDee Lamb at 4'8". I don't see there being much of a difference. CeeDee's a guy that plays a lot in the slot with Dallas. We'll see where he lines up here, but he's a guy that's more of a separator. The player who's least capable of separating among every receiver on the roster, I think, is Evans, which is crazy to say because Evans is an elite receiver himself. Evans is largely dependent on like those touchdown scoring plays. And again, sometimes they're coming on big plays, but a lot of times they're coming close to the end zone where Brady was so successful. So Evans might be a guy that comes in a little overowned for me, but again, you're literally just splitting hairs here. Love Evans as a player, and he easily could have a big game himself, but we need to draw the line and make some of these decisions. So for me, it's going to be more with the separator and CeeDee Lamb, more of the downfield talent. And then obviously Jefferson and Samuel, they're just in a different price tier, but no issues getting to them.
Yeah. CeeDee Lamb fell off. I really fell off at the end of the year. Like, I'm not saying like the long-term potential for him is we're still on track to have him be one of the best players in the league, but I feel like he kind of got in with the more of the beginning half of the year than the last half, where Amari Cooper was the more productive receiver by far in Dallas the last few games there. Still, he's an excellent wide receiver. I do think the little rapport between Justin Jefferson and Kirk Cousins will help him. I do think Deebo Samuel's the most likely to lead the wide receiver core in touches. Is that wrong? Just simply because they probably give him a rush or something like that?
I think you're probably right. He's the most expensive, but like you said, no real worries with salary. So you could get to Deebo easily. And I do think he's the safest in terms of touches.
Yeah. And I still don't know if the salary is worth it. I was looking at it. We've averaged 2 receivers, either wide receiver or tight end, per year in the Pro Bowl with 4 catches or more. And really the absolute ceiling is something like 7 catches. So you're really hoping for, one-on-one in the end zone or a big catch and run. And so I think there is a little bit of edge to go with someone like Samuel, who is one of the best yak guys we've seen in a long time. Before we go into the tight end position, we'll Jordan, you want to do the Awesemo Hall of Fame real quick? Talk about some of our recent winners. I can't hear you, but all right, he's going to pull it up. But yeah, both. Okay. Do you think, as we wait here, do you think Devin Duvernay, Matthew Slater, and Jakeem Grant, the wide receivers that were picked for special teams purposes, do you think they make any impact whatsoever in the DFS side of things, or are you not getting that crazy?
No, I think they need a kick return. Like, I don't think any of them get offensive snaps.
Well, you play like Jakeem Grant and then the NFC defense and try to double dip. You
could do that. Defense has been pretty good historically.
Yeah, actually, that's a good point. I mean, that's a play that I'm definitely going to go towards. And I know we don't have them on the position by position breakdown, but I'm going to be heavy on the defense here because, again, when you have situations where no one's really tackling that much, if a ball gets tipped in the air and there's an interception, you could get like a pick six a lot easier than you would in a typical game. Jordan, is that the thumbs up? You ready to roll? Okay, yeah. The Awesemo Hall of Fame is here once again, letting you know all of our top winners. All you have to do to join the Awesemo Hall of Fame is download the Awesemo profile pic at awesemo.com/avatar. Tweet your wins to @AwesemoHOF on Twitter, and you could win a free month, or you win a free month of Awesemo Plus Platinum. There are some terms. I believe there's only 1 month free that you can get per year here. All right, let's get into our recent winners. 8game, ugly_8game on Twitter. Thanks again to the great team. Their incredible advice and helpful tools have helped me sustain success. They have taught a man to fish in DFS. You love to see it with a nice little NBA bink there. Next up, it is Xmas time with a $300 takedown in the NBA. Awesemo HOF, first time being in the top 3. Let's go. Yeah, we love to see that. It's Praz Racing with a $1,500 first place takedown at Awesemo HOF. Unpack the bags, honey. Mortgage is getting paid. Oh, wait, 7-game slate tonight. I can't lose on a lucky 7-gamer. Hey, babe, we have until the 5th, don't we? Oh, yeah, fire me up. All right. I dig it. All right, next up, Casey Mack with the second place $750 takedown, 178.8 points in the NHL 10K forecheck. He doesn't have the avatar, but he just tags us. We're ready to. It's got a cornhole game of the American flag. All right, it's still in. I finally emerged in these NHL streets at Awesemo HOF. Says Nant 0012 with the $1,000 takedown for second place. And finally, we've got Crazy Pucker with a first of nearly 10,000 entrants, a $150 win. At HOF, at Awesemo HOF, he tweets at, and he has the avatar. You love to see it, Crazy Pucker, and congratulations to your first place win and to all of you for winning here. All right, we're going to round this out with the tight end position. Four incredibly talented tight ends in this slate. Travis Kelce, Mark Andrews on the AFC side, George Kittle, Kyle Pitts on the NFC side. Who among those four are your favorites?
Yeah, so overall tight end strategy, these players generally are coming a little under-owned. There's fewer of them compared to receivers, and they're used a lot like wide receivers to begin with. So they have similar ceilings to receivers, generally making them fantastic plays on Pro Bowl slates. That's been that edge in the past. Again, it's a new year. We get more and more information. So we'll see what the edge is this year. But if you're just playing historics, tight ends have been fantastic players to target. I do have a preference on both these rosters towards Kyle Pitts and Mark Andrews. They're just the more receiver type tight ends among the pairs on each roster. A guy like Kyle Pitts, the fact that he's even labeled a tight end is kind of laughable because he never plays in line. He's a wide receiver with a tight end designation. Like Jimmy Graham back in the day when he petitioned to be a wide receiver and he was playing like 30% of the snaps in line, like Kyle Pitts should do this. He never plays in line. And I'll be curious to see if they use him in line during the Pro Bowl, but I highly doubt it. So if the guy's basically a glorified wide receiver that you could play at tight end, give me a lot of Kyle Pitts.
See, that's my concern here, Matt, though, because you got a lot of really, really good slot weapons at the running back position and at the wide receiver position that are kind of clogging the way for Kyle Pitts in a way we would not see within the Atlanta offense by any means. So I'm actually a little nervous there. He's obviously popping in our value rankings when you compare projections to salary-based expectations, but I'm actually leaning towards George Kittle. I know the salary differential is pretty big. 1K is a lot on a showdown slate, but I don't think there are really any salary concerns here. We can find 1,000 in our player pool this week. And I don't know. I agree with you. Obviously, with the usage, you're factually correct with Kyle Pitts. He was used completely like on a completely different level than those tight ends of the past, like Jimmy Graham. He's a glorified wide receiver, and maybe from a franchise tag standpoint, he maybe should start thinking about that sooner rather than later. But honestly, give me Kittle at 4,200. The only difference I see is like I'm trying to get to Diggs at 46, and so why not try to just get that extra 400 if I'm going up there? I totally see where you're coming from, though.
I mean, you could play a roster that's like $30,000 in salary. You could leave like 20K on the table just fine. Like probably not sacrifice more than a couple points in projection, which I don't think anybody will do. So if you wanted to play Diggs and Pitts and just completely punt off your roster, like your projection shouldn't change that much. Don't you think?
Exactly. Like,
what is the difference between a $50,000 full max salary roster and a $30,000 one that uses Diggs and Pitts and like Cousins?
Oh yeah, I'm absolutely. When I use Fantasy Cruncher this week, there is absolutely no minimum salary that I'm. I
think that might be the biggest edge.
Yeah, just leaving like
copious
over 1,000 on the table
yeah.
is possible here, right? Yeah, we're talking a lot.
Yeah,
yeah. And Kelce, as Steven in chat says, he's a glorified wide receiver too, and he's playing with his quarterback. And they're a little annoyed that they're not playing next Sunday. So you wonder if there's just like a little bit extra oomph that they put into this game. I don't know. That's all narrative based, but
yeah, I think
both Kelce and Andrews.
Like Andrews plays more out wide than Kelce, like by far. It's not even close. Andrews barely plays in line himself. He plays more in line than Pitts, but he basically is a wide receiver.
It's definitely true. It's definitely true. And again, like it's not like they can't run a route when they're lined up in line. It's just they don't run deep.
Well, I mean, like
really hoping they're scoring. Yeah.
What is Kyle Pitts going to do at NFC Pro Bowl practice? And they're like, all right, here's this play for you in line. Like they're going to teach him the tight end position in 1 week.
He's like, man, I don't.
He's like, man, I don't play this position. I play out wide. I'm your X receiver. They call me tight end, but that's Hayden Hurst's job. I'm the receiver.
Yeah.
Where's
All right,
Hayden?
all right, I'm in. He's 3,200, and he's a great value. All right, I'm in. All right, we got a couple minutes here, and we got to talk some kickers and defenses. But before we get out of here, remember, keep it right here at 12 because we got the FanUp Strategy Show with Greg and Terry. But give us a like and a subscribe to this channel so that you can keep up with all of our shows, DFS offers, giveaways, and much, much more. Once you subscribe, also hit that notification bell so that you know when new shows are always going live. You guys know what to do. And thanks, guys, for hanging out on this Pro Bowl strategy show. We're happy to cover this stuff. And, even if it is kind of a wildly unpredictable slate, it's really, really fun to dig into this stuff. All right. Kickers and defenses, they are very valid in terms of projection versus salary-based expectations, but they are also just traditionally players that have overperformed here, particularly the defenses. I'm going to be interested in playing one defense in pretty much every single lineup I play. How about you?
100%. This is a big preseason strategy. Uncertain playing time across the board. What's one position we can lock in that's going to play the entire game? Well, it turns out it's 11 players, and it's the defense on both sides. Guaranteed to be playing you the whole game, accruing points, whereas all of the skill position players are not. So with your defense in this game, it's not like preseason. In preseason, we're playing like Ian Books and these terrible quarterbacks. We are playing legitimate good quarterbacks, playing against them. But at the same time, you're going to see a lot of risky plays downfield for the entertainment factor of the game. A lot of potential turnovers, not in the way of like sacks. You probably won't see anything like that. You probably won't see any fumbles, but you're going to see potential turnover plays for these defenses. And if they're going to be out on the field for the whole game with a multitude of these opportunities, they make a ton of sense.
Yeah. When playing time dwindles for the rest of the player pool, go with the certainty on the defensive side of the ball. Now, the floor is usually better than the ceiling here, but the ceiling for all of these other players has diminished as well. So I don't think the ceiling for the defenses is lower than a typical game. In fact, it's probably higher, right? And it's lower for literally every other skill position here. So I think at 2,200 for the AFC and 2,000 for the NFC, they are the best values on the slate in terms of floor and ceiling. I will definitely have some of them at the captain position, as weird as that sounds. I will certainly have ones with two of the defenses. And then we go to the kickers, where I feel a little bit different. There is a salary differential. They are the lowest salary players, but I feel like the ceiling isn't quite there for the kickers in this game. They're just not going to be going for that many kicks on either side. I think the defensive ceilings are much, much higher here. Am I wrong there?
I agree with you. I think kickers that are very safe, again, they're going to be playing the whole time. Anytime there's a kick, they're accruing points. So kickers and defenses to me are very good low risk options, cash options, particularly kickers. And it's the ceiling you talk about, the difference there is like a kicker just can't score a touchdown. A defense easily could. And on preseason slates, Pro Bowl slates, a touchdown is vastly more important than a regular season touchdown. All these players are going to have limited opportunities. So whoever secures that 6 points, that's going to give you a huge edge. And if it happens to be the defense, even better. They're cheap and they're going to be accruing points in other ways through the whole game. So ultimately, kicker and defense, very safe plays, slight lean towards the defenses.
We've had a defense in the top 4 scorers in the Pro Bowl in each of the last four Pro Bowls here, 2017, 18, and 19. And so I do think that.
And 20, there were 5 interceptions thrown.
Yeah, I was going to say like 20 was the bonanza. So that's like a wild one. But Jordan Burkhardt, Matthew Slater's dad, Jackie, was my basketball coach in 5th grade. Well, now we're rooting for Matthew Slater again. That's great. DFS play of the day. That's awesome, man.
Dude, there were 9 turnovers in the Pro Bowl in 2020. 9.
That's a lot of turnovers. I mean, I think that's the real takeaway here is that kickers are floor. If you're playing cash games, which I'm not, like, sure, they make sense, but the defenses with such a minimally higher salary make way, way more sense to me. All right, it's noon here. We got to get out of here. Any last thoughts about this wild Pro Bowl slate, Matt?
I think we hit on it most. I think the biggest edge, everybody knows about the tight end edge at this point. I think it's going to be leaving salary on the table. I really do. at the end of the day, your natural instinct is going to be to max out that salary. And it's not just leave like $1,000 on the table here and there. I think you could get crazy and leave like $20,000 on the table in some of these rosters with no problem and still have a salary or a roster that projects extremely well. So that's going to be an approach I'm taking.
I dig it. I'm going to be taking a few flyers here and there on the fullbacks. Flyers on fullbacks. Pat Ricard, not so much, but Kyle Juszczyk maybe sneaking into the end zone here. Maybe I'm chasing that Anthony Sherman game too hard here, but I think it's not the worst idea in the world. All right, guys, this was a lot of fun. We will be back with all of the Super Bowl 56 coverage that you could want next week. Make sure to keep it right here for the FanUp Strategy Show with Greg and Terry. For Matt _Gajewski on Twitter. I am Matt Savoca at Draftaholic on Twitter. We'll talk to you guys next time.
What is going on, guys? This is the FanUp Strategy Show. We're going to be talking about the Super Bowl. If you guys aren't aware of what that is not the Pro Bowl, which is happening this weekend. The Super Bowl, which happens the week after. It is the Rams taking on the Bengals, and a game some people, I believe, are anticipating. And we've got some contest talk about over on FanUp. And if you guys are not familiar with FanUp, you could sign up using the link in the description box below. You head on over to FanUp. You can download their app. And if you make an account using the promo code Awesemo, you don't have to put any money down. You just sign up using the promo code Awesemo, get $20 in free play. Don't have to do anything other than that. Don't have to put in any kind of credit card information. Don't have to make a deposit. That's it. Use that promo code. You get $20, free dollars. So Terry, one game, we don't have too much to dive all that deep into, but just kind of some overarching thoughts here. Who's your pick to win the game?
I'm leaning slightly toward the Rams. I think it's going to be a really good game. I think this is probably the most interesting contest we could have gotten out of the four teams that were on the board last weekend. So I'm happy that this is the matchup we get. I think it's going to be a fun, competitive Super Bowl for a change. And I think I'm leaning toward the Rams, but I'm expecting it to be really close. I think these two teams line up pretty well, and they've got similar weapons on both sides. So I expect a really good contest. It could easily go either way, but I'm leaning toward the Rams. That's what I'm rooting for, I think, as well. Little LA, California favoritism there on my part. I really like Cooper Kupp. I like Odell. We've talked about that before, so that's where I'm going with it.
And something else that I'm going to throw in about this game, I'm not sure it's going to be competitive. I have a gut feeling. Remember the first game the Bengals played in the playoffs? Joe Burrow was sacked 9 times. The Bengals do not have a good offensive line. They have a terrific offense. They've got a lot of good weapons there. Burrow is great. His wide receivers are great. Mixon, as far as running backs go, he's probably one of the few that actually does make a difference. Mm-hmm. That game where he was sacked 9 times against the Titans, and I think he's going up against Aaron Donald, going up against Von Miller. A little concerning to me. I wouldn't be surprised if the Rams defensive line just has their way with the Bengals offensive line and just kind of shuts down the offense. That's in my head the way that I think this game is probably most likely to play out, but we'll see. So the Rams are going to be my pick. If I had to, take a side of the game, I would be going with the Rams side there. They're also slight favorites, but I think the line could use to be a little bit bigger. What do you think of that line of logic?
Yeah, it's not a bad thought. I mean, if you're picking somewhere where these two teams do kind of stack up differently, it's that Rams front four. And I mean, when you're bringing in a Von Miller, this is the situation. This is why they want him there. So yeah, it's not a bad thought with the weaker offensive line that those guys and their ability to get to the QB. I can definitely see it. Obviously this is what they're preparing for. This is what they're game planning for. They know that that's coming. So we'll see how they come out. And it's all about how they, initially attack that in the first part of the game, whether they can get out ahead and, maybe negate the pass rush a little bit. We'll see how it comes down. But yeah, if this game is won decisively, that's probably where it would be won decisively. That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, so let's start talking about the actual Super Bowl here. And if you guys aren't familiar with how FanUp works, Jordan has it right up there, up on the screen. Jordan, why don't you click on the Super Bowl 10K Liddy contest, where legends are made, according to the text there. So the way that FanUp works, it's different than FanDuel, different than DraftKings in a couple of ways. The big one being this: there's no salary cap, so you can play whoever you want, which also means that there's going to be some more concentrated ownership. There's also one other little wrinkle. There's something called the flex position, which is going to be a spot where whichever player you put in the flex, it has to be a running back, a wide receiver, or a tight end. They get 1.5x their fantasy points. So we're building a lineup, and keep in mind, this is only for the Super Bowl, doesn't include the Pro Bowl. We're going to be playing a quarterback, 2 running backs, 2 wide receivers, and a tight end. And let's start by talking about the QB, Terry, because we've got Matthew Stafford, we've got Joe Burrow. And unlike last week, where I think we did have, even though there was more options, Patrick Mahomes was projected way higher than every other QB on the slate. How do you look at the Super Bowl where we only have 2 QBs to choose from between Joe Burrow and Matt Stafford?
Yeah, and looking at our board, we've got them projected so similarly. It's essentially a coin toss: 20.94 using DK projections, 20.23 for Burrow, 29.94 for Stafford. that's essentially the same projection. If we're looking at the yards per pass attempt, 6.6 yards per pass attempt allowed by the Bengals, 6.4 yards per pass attempt allowed by the Rams. So, I mean, we're talking about negligible differences. Both of these teams have elite wide receiver options. They've got really strong passing games. I'm totally fine going with either one of these quarterbacks. I'll spin it back to what you just said, just on the idea that Joe Burrow might be under more of a threat from the pass rush. Let's go with Matt Stafford.
And then, also just given the way that you and I both think the Rams are going to win, the Bengals do appear to be kind of a public team. A lot of people are certainly backing Joe Burrow because he's cool. I think that's something that's kind of resonated with people. Do you think there's going to be a massive ownership gap between the two QBs for this contest?
So I don't think I was looking for our ownership earlier, and I don't think we had it up on the site yet for the Super Bowl. I'm sure we're working on that behind the scenes. I would expect that, especially when we've only got the two guys to choose from, like, it's not going to get that divergent where it's going to make a massive difference. And it's not going to be really a decision-making factor here. If we do see it in our projections for the other sites where there is, Joe Burrow's coming in 75% for whatever reason, and Matthew Stafford's coming in 25% at like negligible salary differences, then you can extrapolate from that the same thing would probably be true over here. I just don't really expect it. At worst, what's it, 60-40 maybe, and that would be a difference enough to play, but I don't see it even going to that degree.
Yeah. And once again, like I was saying before, it's different. Last week we had Patrick Mahomes. This is just off the top of my head. I think we had him projected for something like 26 fantasy points, and the next highest projected QB was at 20 fantasy points. There's just not that big of a gap between Matthew Stafford and Joe Burrow. The other thing to consider too with this game is we could see a situation where the Rams get ahead, the Bengals need to throw to keep up late, and that could be a situation which leads to more passing of the football. Hard to really dive too much more into the quarterbacks because there's two of them, and we talked about both of them. There's certainly not an angle where you could play a backup quarterback, number one, that's generally stupid to do on one game slates anyway, and that's not even an option that we have here. So we'll go with Matthew Stafford here. Jordan, bring up the running backs, and something else that kind of stands out when you're playing a one game slate and you have to choose two running backs. Quick math for me. Terry, how many starting running backs are there in this game?
At least two. I'm sure of that. Is there a third starting running back?
No, it's just two, which leads me to this here. Is there any reasonable way that you could see yourself getting to a backup running back? I know Cam Akers is a little bit banged up with his shoulder right now. So what? He's going to be good to go for the Super Bowl. You're fooling yourself. That's not. The guy tore his Achilles earlier in the year, and he's back for the playoffs. So I think a little bit of banged up shoulder is going to hold him out, especially when you consider that, he hurt his shoulder last game. What did he miss? 3 plays, comes right back out on the field. So that shoulder injury, it's going to be fine by the time the Super Bowl runs around. Is there any way you could see yourself getting away from Cam Akers or Joe Mixon as the two starting running backs in this game?
I would say that the only argument for it really is if you're just looking at it as this is the point at which I'm going to differentiate this lineup from a lot of people and try and make a unique build here. And then maybe, you can stick like a Sony Michel in there. Maybe you go to a P. Ryan and stick him in there. And, it's going to be suboptimal in terms of how it projects, but you're just taking that dart on the touchdown upside of one of these guys, getting a carry near the goal line and getting it over the goal line and into the end zone. So you can try and pick off TDs that way, and it is kind of an interesting point at which to differentiate. We've got multiple wide receiver spots, so there's going to be a lot of different combinations of those wideouts, where I think given the 2 running back spots, 2 starting running backs setup, a lot of people are just going to plug and play the top 2 starting running backs here. So I think there's a little bit of viability for the primary backups for sure.
Yeah. And then I have to ask you this question. If you had, and not saying you have to, but if there's a situation where you absolutely had to play a backup running back for whatever reason, who would you be more apt to go to or most apt to go to in this game?
It would probably be Sony Michel. If you're going to anybody else, you're kind of looking for more like a big play, like, weird thing that breaks. Where Sony Michel, I can see a narrative where he's getting some just direct calls near the end zone. I can see the idea of Cam Akers gets a few additional plays off, so he's going to be the next logical guy to touch the ball. I think it makes sense from that perspective. So he'd probably be the guy. Just it seems like in my head the most logical guy to go to there and the most likely guy to get the ball in the end zone if we're going to a backup.
Yeah, I think I guess we can make somewhat of a case for Samaje Perine just because he scored a touchdown last week. Now, with that said, he hardly got touches, but he just happened to bring. Actually, if I'm not mistaken, I think that was his first snap of the entire game that he scored a touchdown on. The Bengals were kind of struggling to run the football. They put Perine in. He catches a dump off pass and runs it in, whatever it was, 34 yards for a touchdown, whatever the yardage ended up being. But realistically, we want to go with Joe Mixon and Cam Akers here, right?
Yeah, look, if we're going by the projections, if we're going by the probabilities of who's going to score the most fantasy points, it's easily those guys. If we're not worrying about ownership and we're just plugging in, we're taking advantage of the ability to plug in whoever we want on the FanUp, then absolutely, those are your two guys. It's a no-brainer.
All right, Cam Akers, Joe Mixon, that's the chalk. But with that said, I think it's reasonable enough chalk. We're going to be talking about wide receivers, tight ends. I think those are other positions where we could maybe a little bit more reasonably differentiate away from the popular plays. So let's hit on the wide receivers now. And Cooper Kupp, he's going to project for more fantasy points than everybody else in this game by a very, very wide margin. The only question here, and it's the same question I posed to you last week, are we playing him in the flex spot or are we playing him in the wide receiver spot, Terry?
Well, last week he came out and put up, 11 catches, 142 yards, and 2 TDs, averaging 12.9 a catch, outpacing Odell, got in the end zone both times. We're going to this quarterback. I think it makes a ton of sense to put his super receiver in that spot. Like you said, he's projecting 5 points beyond the quarterbacks on the DraftKings projections. It's just bananas how good this guy is, and he just never slows down. Like, I think I've been kind of just waiting all season for that, like, one game where, all right, Cooper Kupp came out and had 2 catches and 3 fantasy points. And it was just that one clunker game. And it just doesn't come. This guy's so good. Pop him in the multiplier spot. Let's just take advantage, especially if we're just going chalk with this build.
And then I want to ask you, though, just because I do think one of the probably more reasonable ways to differentiate, we'll talk about the superstar spot later. I do think maybe one of the more reasonable ways to find an upside lineup that has a little bit of differentiation is going with like a Jamar Chase or one of the running backs in that flex spot. So that is something else to keep in mind as we go through this. But as for the other wide receivers in this game, clearly the next best wide receiver option behind Cooper Kupp is Jamar Chase. Mm-hmm. But let's operate under the assumption that we're playing Cooper Kupp in that flex spot. We're getting 1.5x fantasy points. We've got Jamar Chase in the other wide receiver spot. Who's your next favorite wide receiver? Because there are a lot of guys from here where we are going to be looking at a little bit of different lineups where not everybody's going to be playing the same guy between, Odell Beckham, Tyler Boyd, T. Higgins. There's a lot of other wide receivers in the mix we could go with here. Which one's your favorite?
Yeah, so I've mentioned a few times I do really like getting to Odell in a lot of situations. I think he tends to go under-owned, although in a single game slate where we're all picking whoever we want, I'm sure he'll be pretty correctly owned and pretty popular. But I have no issues going to any of the Tyler Boyds of the world, the Van Jeffersons of the world. These are guys who are involved in their passing game. They're highly skilled receivers. They're good weapons to go to. So anybody that's going to be differentiated, and if we had ownership numbers, we could speak to it a little bit better. So keep an eye out for those and just start looking at, the guys who are just purely lower owned. I think it makes a lot of sense to just kind of gravitate toward at least one, if not two of those choices. And whether you're doing it in a situation where, all right, we've already got Cooper Kupp in there, do we go to Odell and just play like a Rams wipeout and try and get as much of that passing game as we want to? Do we do a weird build where we've got Stafford and then Cooper Kupp, and then we focus everything else into the Cincinnati passing game, but without the quarterback? There are differentiated types of approaches that you can take to just the overall lineup construction just by making different choices in here. I think if I was picking a just total favorite, it would probably be Higgins just based on how we've got him projected. But for me, if I'm building, I'm going to Odell, I think primarily over Higgins in that spot. I do agree that Chase is the second best overall receiver on the board.
And then for the wide receivers here, does which quarterback you choose in your lineup, does it have any impact on what you're doing with wide receivers? I know you and I both agreed that Stafford is our favorite guy, but let's say you're playing multiple lineups in this contest. It's not unreasonable to play some with Stafford, some with Burrow. There's not that much of a projection gap between the two. Is which one you play there going to impact whether you go with like a Beckham or T. Higgins or Tyler Boyd as a secondary wideout option?
I mean, yeah, in that you want to try and correlate some of those potential points. You definitely want to bear in mind that since we've only got one game, there's going to be a limited amount of scoring just overall on the board. So put together different combinations. Like if you're going to a lot of combinations of Kupp and Odell together, then start working with your different combinations of some of these other position players and make sure you're covering a lot of possibilities within that blanket that you've created of Kupp and Odell lineups. I would try and get to a lot of differentiation, though. I think on a slate like this, if I'm building multiple lineups, I'm going to try and put together as many unique entries as I can, and not necessarily sweat so much of I have to get two primary receivers with my quarterback. You're going to get that anyway, just based on one game, so many spots to fill. So I'm not really going to worry too much about it. It's going to come together naturally anyway. It is a consideration you always want to stack for football. Trying to stretch this answer a little. That's what I got.
Yeah, fair enough. And then anybody else, if we're going really deep, Jordan, could you scroll down through the wide receivers a little bit? Oh, look at that. We've hit the bottom. I thought maybe there'd be some names way at the bottom were kind of off the board that we could talk about, but it looks like they've only got kind of the core guys included. Odell Beckham Jr., Tyler Boyd, T. Higgins.
Yeah, I mean, that kind of I was going to say that kind of scratches what I was saying about a lot of the different combinations. There's a limited number of combinations that we can build with these guys. So, I mean, we're just going to basically anybody that we want and putting them in, click on whoever you want, put them in the lineup.
All right. Let's head on over to the tight end position now. And this is where things are getting a little dicey because CJ Uzomah hurt. Tyler Higbee also hurt. But we don't know what their status is right now because this game is, let's see, quick math. What are we? Nine days away from the Super Bowl here. So Jordan's counting up his fingers really quick. He's going like this, which I don't know. It's like when he counts down for shows. Who knows how many fingers he's holding up? But so for the tight end position, let's look at this a couple of different ways because we've got some time left. And if anybody's questions, you can throw those in as well. But let's first assume that all the tight ends are healthy. Let's say we get a fully healthy CJ Uzomah and Tyler Higbee. Under that sort of circumstance, Terry, who's your favorite tight end to go to?
I said it last time around, and I'm going to go back to the same answer. I've been getting to a lot of Higbee throughout the season, and at some point he's going to deliver for me, and maybe it's here he can win me a handbag. So I'll go back to the Tyler Higbee choice. I like him. I like going to that offense. And I think that just on some recency, I think people are going to be more drawn to CJ Uzomah if he goes. I think people will, there'll be a good amount of people who just click on Kendall Blanton regardless of Higbee's status. So I think maybe we can thread a needle for some lower owned ownership on Higbee there.
Yeah. And the other thing too with these guys is I guess Higbee's more likely to play than CJ Uzomah. I'm going to look up really quickly to see if we've got any updates on these guys today. To me, it would seem crazy if Uzomah is able to play because he had it was an MCL. I don't know exactly what the degree of the sprain was, but
yeah, I think it's the same injury for both of them too, right? MCL.
So let's see, CJ Uzomah. All right. Well, Ian Rappaport's repeat. You know, what's part of the issue also when people report on like knee injuries, people don't realize that sprains have way different severities and span a lot of. If you tear your ACL, that's still a sprained knee. So a lot of guys, when they tear their ACL, it's initially diagnosed as a sprained knee. All torn ACLs are knee sprains. Not all knee sprains are torn ACLs. So some people look at it, I'm like, oh, look, it's only a sprained MCL. So people are like, that's good news for some. Maybe but it looks like we don't know the severity of it yet because obviously, you know, grade 1 could be week to week, but then you get to a grade 2 MCL injury, and then you're looking at, you know, like 6 to 8 weeks. So I'm no doctor. I know I'm photoshopped in one of our recent thumbnails for a YouTube video, the NBA injury report, which I'm going to be recording after this. But just some overall little bit of information there. I think it would be kind of unlikely if Uzomah plays, but we shall see. But let's talk about some of these backups now, Terry. We've got Kendall Blanton, who played a pretty significant role for the Rams last game after Tyler Higbee got hurt. And then we've got Drew Sample, who exists. I don't really know what else to say about him. He exists. Yeah, Drew Sample, you know, computer-generated player. He's out there, though. If there's a situation where Higbee and Uzomah both don't play, which of the backup tight ends would you get to, knowing full well that backup tight ends have, for whatever reason, been extremely prominent in primetime games for DFS contests this year, to the point too where I was like, this is surely going to normalize at some point. And now we're at the Super Bowl and it never did. And we could be looking at 2 starting backup tight ends. So what a better way to finish the season. Sample versus Blanton. Any takes here?
I think it's got to strongly favor Kendall Blanton just based on what we saw last week. 5 catches, 57 yards, definitely was involved in the offense and looked kind of dynamic out there. He made some things happen when he made those catches. So I think it would be pretty firmly that one. If we're looking at when Sample was in the game, 1 catch for 4 yards, not exactly the same kind of performance, the same kind of dynamic nature. And I think that they're comfy just kind of firing away to the wideouts in Cincinnati, where the tight end going to be a little bit more involved in what the Rams are looking to do. So I think based on that, I would lean toward Blanton. So, cue up the 2 touchdown and 11-yard day for Drew Sample.
And I mean, the other thing too is just because these guys both got hurt so early in last game, we could kind of look at some of the target shares here and draw some conclusions from that about perhaps what the role in the offense could look like. Kendall Blanton last game against the 49ers, 5 catches for 57 yards. He was targeted 5 times. That's somewhat of a substantial role. Drew Sample, meanwhile, I don't have it right off the top of my head, but I'm looking it up right now. I don't remember him really doing anything significant last week after CJ Uzomah got hurt.
Yards, yeah.
It was his final stat line was 1 catch for 4 yards, 2 targets though. And that was also overtime, so he played extra snaps. So just based on that information, Kendall Blanton, that's our guy of the backup tight ends. Are we comfortable with that, Terry?
I think so. I think that's the backup tight end. Like you said, this is where we're making our money. So fire up the Kendall Blanton.
All right. It is time to get on with the flex position. And like I said at the top of the show, flex position. The player you play here, it has to be a wide receiver, running back, or a tight end. Whoever you play in there gets 1.5x their fantasy points. So Cooper Kupp's clearly the chalk play here. He's the number one guy to go with. If you want to differentiate, I do think we could go with Joe Mixon or Cam Akers. Here is the downside of that, though. That means we have to play another shitty running back if we do that. So the opportunity cost, is it worth the squeeze, Terry? If we're trying to differentiate and play Mixon or Akers in that 1.5x spot, is it worth us having to play Samaje Perine or Sony Michel in one of the other running back spots?
I mean, it's a differentiated, interesting kind of a build at the very least, right? So we're doing something that not a lot of people will be doing. It's not without upside. It's going to be suboptimal in terms of how it projects out versus a lot of different options on the board for us. But yeah, and I would consider probably going with the direct backup to whoever we put in the multiplier spot. Like give me Akers in the multiplier and Sony Michel in the running back spot versus like a Joe Mixon, Samaje Perine, Akers in the multiplier spot. Like if I'm doing that, I think I want to book the upside of just guaranteeing myself the touchdowns and the production from the same backfield from one team.
Here's actually kind of an angle I'm thinking about now, just as we're talking through this. Do you think there's any merit to playing potentially 2 tight ends? Let's say Uzomah and Tyler Higbee are both active. What if we went double tight ends, played either Higbee or Uzomah? I know your lean was towards Higbee. Playing Higbee in the flex spot, because that is not something that really anybody's going to do, but there is kind of a noticeable upside there. We've seen Uzomah and Higbee both individually have big games at times.
Yeah, I don't hate that whatsoever. It's definitely a like you said, it's going to be a very unique construction. Certainly not a lot of people on a site where you can pick basically whoever you want and whatever combinations you want. Not a lot of people going to be going double tight end. Probably not a lot of people going to be putting either one of the tight ends in any situation into that multiplier spot like that, which I guess is the requirement for doing double tight end. But yeah, I have no issue with doing that. It's going to be unique. It's going to be a situation that's probably going to require you to get the tight end right that you're putting in that multiplier. And by get it right, I mean get the touchdown out of them, get a 2 touchdown game out of them. But yeah, I think there's at least some viability in that approach in terms of making a unique lineup, which is what we're really after here.
All right, 1 minute left. Guys, if you haven't done it already, like the video, subscribe to the YouTube channel. Also, if you're looking to play on FanUp for the first time, you just sign up using that promo code Awesemo. You don't have to put any money down. You get $20 when you sign up. Here's the final question I'm going to ask you, and we'll sign off with this, Terry. You have to play anybody in the flex spot who isn't Cooper Kupp. Who would be your guy? Can't be Cooper Kupp. Anybody else?
I'm going to go back to the well with Odell Beckham here. I've been saying his name all throughout the show, and just a little old heartstrings. I'm hoping Odell gets a Super Bowl here. DFS wise, I think Jamar Chase is probably a very good answer there. Our next most highly projected wideout from a team that we expect to be passing quite a bit. So Jamar Chase, probably the better DFS answer. If I'm doing it for me, it's Odell.
All right, that is going to do it for us. Thank you guys very much for whoever stuck around and watched. Haven't done already, like the video, subscribe to the YouTube channel on the way out. Got a lot more content coming up today. MMA strategy show, NBA deeper dive, NBA live before lock. Good luck today, guys.